the trending? Do you think that what would be your explanation for Harris getting a little giddy up?
First of all, thank you for having me, Chris. Listen, we don't believe the trending. It doesn't reflect any of the polls we've seen it out there, either public or private. So, that's a new poll that's emerging. We'll take a look and analyze it, but it reflects nothing that we've seen in the last 2 weeks. We've certainly never seen a 15-point edge for Harris. What we've seen, however, is we've seen people want to focus on the economy and people want to focus on immigration. And just today, you saw, the jobs report that just underperformed at such a level that it shocked Wall Street. So as people are going to the polls on election day, the Friday before the election, they're reminded of what's at stake. There are jobs at stake. There's an economy that's underperforming, and today's report showed how it's underperforming, and that's going to have a huge impact towards the end. So if there is an October surprise or a November surprise, it's just how poorly the jobs report number was today and what the impact that's going to be going forward for the next 4 days.
Jeremy, how do you see it? Because, your side is pointing towards changes in the economy that would attribute to her gaining momentum. The third quarter was higher than expected. Consumer confidence is on the rise. Why do you believe she's getting a late push? And if so, what is it?
Yeah, and Chris, thanks for having me. Really appreciate your time. Look, I think it's simple. I think Harris has been on message throughout this entire campaign and has really pushed to bring tangible, specific solutions to the economic problems Americans say are important to them. I think when Americans are going to the polls, while gas prices today might be lower, while inflation might be lower, the thing they're talking about most is what are you going to do for prices at the grocery store? And Kamala Harris has made the case that she has plans that she will put in place when she is president of the United States that will help address those issues, like fighting price gouging, for example, making homes more affordable, et cetera, her opportunity economy. And so I think the fact that the Harris campaign has been consistent on message, they're seeing positives when it comes to independent voters. I will say, 15 points might look really good, but I have no doubt the Harris campaign is going to continue pushing as if they were dead tied in an election like this. Because, Chris, as you just said, you want to make sure you're grinding to the last day because you don't want voters to get too confident that they're going to win.
Well, look what happened with Clinton. Hillary, of course. And just so for you guys at home, if you're just tuning in, nobody's saying Harris is up 15 points anywhere. We're talking about with independents in Pennsylvania. That's the most recent metric that just came out. It's one demographic in one state. That's what the margin is. Brian, help me with this. I believe that this is the least substantive, most scare the voter into voting for you versus the other side that I've seen. Yes, it's been incremental. Yes, we've been devolving. But do you remember a campaign where it was cheaper, not in terms of how much it mattered, because it's always the most important, and there's always problems, it's always the most important, but in terms of the tactics being employed by both sides? You ever seen it cheaper, more petty?
No. I mean, listen, I think Bush-Kerry got pretty bad in 2004, but it's clear that these two just do not like each other, and they just have completely different visions. And not only that, the stakes are even higher. You have to remember, you had the lawfare that's been employed against President Trump. And so the stakes being as high as they are, the dislike that exists, presidential politics is always about who you want to have who would you like to have a beer with, more of a personality contest. That's why I'm not surprised the substantive stuff's not catching, but it has gotten very nasty. This may be the nastiest, at least in.
Used to be who do you want to have a beer with? Now, Jeremy, it's who do you want to throw a beer bottle at more is what the metric has become. I mean, and it's so gratuitous. This isn't the 60s. You know what I mean? We don't have, the closest thing we have to a huge class of people who have been demonstrably underserved such that there was anger in the streets is reproductive rights. And I don't know what I'm missing about that issue and women. Jeremy, what do you know about how the economy is compromising this straight single issue focus on the fact that women just had a right taken from them? It's the first time we've seen it in American history.
Yeah, and I think the reality is that voters go to the polls for many different issues. So, for example, Chris, you mentioned abortion is critically important to many women. And most Americans actually believe that the Roe standard should be that standard across the nation. That was taken away with the Dobbs decision. But one of the things that I think happens is that Americans, when they're looking at issues, they're talking about how they can afford groceries at the end of the day and which candidate is going to make it better for them in the future. And so I think what we're seeing, Chris, are voters looking at a lot of issues and then deciding on what candidate is going to do the best for the majority of those issues. We have seen this election cycle that abortion, immigration, and the economy are those top 3 issues overall. And while both candidates have made a case somewhat on how they're going to solve those issues, I really believe, one of the campaigns has really been consistent across the board on how they're going to tackle those issues. I do think, however, Chris, we're talking about the presidency right now, but those local state referendums that we're seeing across states across the union where abortion is on the ballot, we're going to see a repeat of what happened during the midterm elections and during those referendums where voters do come out about that one single issue, especially women across the nation, especially those who are in Gen Z, who look around and say, my parents, my mom had a different right than I do, and we need to make sure we codify that somehow, which, as you know, Chris, will be difficult because Congress has to be involved in that.
Hey, thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your screen. And don't forget, click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.